Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Dragons and Dice. Last week we broke down the character creation for the new DaggerHeart TTRPG system that's out, and this week we're going to be going over the core mechanics for that same system. Let's check it out. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. So last week we went over chapter 1 of the book, which was basically the overview, kind of broad spectrum of what the DaggerHeart system was going to be, and then the majority of that was all character creation. But as we move into chapter 2 of this book, we get a lot more into how the actual core mechanics of this system are going to work. And it does start off with a nice little intro, and it's very similar to D&D, as the GM will give out the lay of the land and describe the scenes, and then the players and the GM will ask questions, and then the players will make a decision on a course of action. And then if a roll is needed, the GM's going to ask for that roll, and they're going to set the difficulty, and then the players will roll that check. And then we do that all over again and again and again until everything's resolved. But the interesting part of this system is that all of those checks are going to be made with using 2d12, your duality dice. And one of these will be for hope, and one of these will be for fear. And you'll have different levels of success based on what you roll on the combined total of those dice and which of the two is higher, whether your hope die is higher or your fear die is higher. And so this is going to really add a lot more dynamics into everything that goes on in the game. Let's hop in and check out these mechanics. First up, the biggest change, DaggerHeart uses a spotlight system where one player or the GM will get to be in the lead and they'll be making their moves, and the other players will be helping or reacting to what the GM is doing. So when the spotlight is on the players, they can go in any order they choose. There is no longer initiative. And I really like this for a couple of reasons. Like, say you're playing D&D and you're a rogue and you want to do your sneak attack. You need someone within 5 feet or a way to get advantage. You don't necessarily want to go first, but you're going to have the highest dex most likely on the table. And so it kind of like hamstrings you a little bit. That's not a problem anymore. Now combat is so much more fluid, as if you are a healer and you want to go last until people take some damage, you can sit in the back and wait your turn. And if you're, ready to go, ready to rock and got a bunch of cooldowns and a bunch of hope saved up and you want to just hop in and make a big splash at the start of combat, you can go. And then if you succeed with hope, and we'll go over this in a second, and you get to keep the spotlight, you can go again. You can take 2 turns in a row if you want. It's whatever works the best for the party. And I like this because the lack of initiative really lets the synergies of your groups come through, and they all get to make their moves at the most optimal time. Now, for the actual mechanics, the players are going to be making their attacks, whether it's spell attacks or melee attacks or checks. Anything will be made with 2d12s that are your duality dice. One of these stands for hope and one of these stands for fear. And there are going to be multiple levels of success based off of which you roll. So a roll with hope is a roll where your hope die on the 2d12s is the higher of the two. And a roll with fear is when the opposite happens and your fear die is the higher. Anytime you roll doubles, that turns into a crit, which actually works out to be in the player's favor because that gives you an 8.33% chance of critting, whereas on a D20 system, you're just at a normal 5% to roll any number. So I like that part too, is it makes it a lot more exciting rolls because crits are going to come up more often. And with the, is it going to be with hope? Is it going to be with fear? It makes combat feel a lot more dynamic. Let's say that we have 2d12s. One that's blue, we'll use that for hope, and one that's red, we'll use that for fear. And say we roll a 7 on our blue D12 and a 6 on our red, that will be a 13 with hope. And if that passes the AC of the monster that we're attacking or the check that we're doing or whatever, if it's a success with hope, the players get to keep the spotlight. And keeping the spotlight's important because that means that the next person in the party can do their action and do their moves. But let's say that we just inverted those two and we got a success, but with fear. That means that our fear die was higher on our 2d12s. That means that whatever we were doing, the attack or the check, is going to succeed and we're going to get to do our damage and all that. But the spotlight is going to jump back to the GM and they're going to get to add a fear. and this is important, the GM's fear is kind of like the way their fuel for using legendary resistances, using environmental turns, and a lot of different abilities that the monsters have will be burn a fear to activate this monster, burn a fear to do this, burn 3 fear to take another turn. A lot of the GM's moves are going to be fear-based, and that's where the like dynamics of the hope and fear come in. It's like, oh, if you roll with fear, you're fueling the GM's tank to use his monster's abilities against you. One thing to note, the GM does not roll duality dice. They use a standard D20, and they use that for all their monster stat blocks. All the GM's rolls will be with a D20. The next option is, say we fail. Say that we rolled that 13 with hope, but the DC was a 15 or the armor class was a 15. That character still gets to mark a hope to have to use later on, but on any fail, it goes to the GM side. And same thing, if you fail with fear, the GM gets a fear, and then it goes to his turn or her turn, and that's double bad for the players because now you got more fuel in the tank for the monsters. One other thing to mention, when you crit in DaggerHeart, you get to reduce your stress by 1, and so that's kind of important because if you become fully stressed out, you can't use any of your abilities that require you to mark a stress, and you also become vulnerable, which means you will take double the amount of damage. And that's kind of, a terrible thing to have happen to you. Just like vulnerability in D&D makes you very susceptible to getting dead really quick. Same thing in DaggerHeart. So it's important that when you crit, you get a clear stress. And that's just another way to make the crit seem like even more important in this system. So once you're in combat and you're being attacked by the GM, your first line of defense in DaggerHeart is going to be your evasion stat. And this is going to kind of correspond with what your armor class is in D&D. It is affected by your class and by your armor, and there are certain other trinkets or magic items or anything that can boost your evasion obviously goes into this stat also. And if someone hits your evasion or above, you will take damage depending on how hard you get hit. This is a drastically different system than D&D. We now have damage thresholds and armor slots to help us deal with the damage that we're going to take. And your damage thresholds will decide how much HP you have to mark. So the way you calculate your thresholds in DaggerHeart is you have armor, and your armor will have what your low threshold is and what your high threshold is. And you get +1 to that for each level that you have. So the sorcerer I did last week had damage thresholds of 5 and 11, and it was level 1. So my starting out thresholds were 6 and 12. And that means if someone attacks me and they beat my evasion, if they deal 5 or less damage, that is minor damage, and I will mark 1 HP in loss. If they deal 6 to 11, that's major damage, and I would mark 2 HP. And if they deal 12 or more, that's severe damage, and I would mark 3 HP. There is another special rule that if you take double your high threshold in damage in one hit, you have to mark 4 HP. So that's kind of like a really big hit. That'd be like basically double your HP in D&D getting smacked. So it's an extra HP. And I like this. It really makes it where combat will be more intense and tactical. I mean, no matter how hard you hit something now, the most damage it can take on a turn is going to be 4. And that's kind of nice, I think, because if you're a GM or a DM, you've run a lot of combats where somebody will go crit happy. You'll have a paladin, crit and drop a 4th level smite. And it's like, man, they just did, 130 damage to this guy's 150 HP. And now that fight's kind of basically not fun anymore because it was supposed to be good, but this one lucky roll kind of just negated all of it. Now, that would just be like, oh, you topped over its high threshold. It takes 4 HP in damage, but that monster probably has between 7 and 10 HP to deal with. Like, that's going to be a standard starting out for monsters. That might be a little high for level 1 monsters. They'll probably be closer to between the 2 HP range. And it's just an interesting way that the system does to make combat like, oh, you hit really hard and you did all this cool stuff, but it doesn't just completely kibosh the story that this is supposed to be an intense fight. This is supposed to be a big bad. You don't get 2 crits and it's like, well, game over, we're done. And I like that a lot. So the next thing to go over with damage thresholds are armor slots. And each of your armors, when you look at the inventory list of that is in the book where all the armors are listed that are in the game, they all have a armor rating beside them, and that is how many armor slots that armor has. And the way that works is you can mark an armor slot and reduce your damage threshold by 1. So if I took a severe, I could mark it and move it down to the middle mark. And so instead of taking 3 damage in HP, I would only take 2, but I have to mark one of my armor slots. The sorcerer we built last week, it had 3 of those. And one thing of note, you can only mark 1 armor slot at a time unless you have some item, ability, or class feature that allows you to do that. Some of the take-your classes, they have the ability to mark 2 armor slots as a way to, like, instead of 3 HP, I'm only going to take 1, but it costs 2 armor slots. So that's something to keep in mind. That's how you reduce the damage, and that's why armor with good armor slots is important, because it's basically each armor slot is saving you 1 HP. The next mechanic this game has is called stress, and this represents the mental and physical strain you face as you adventure, and certain features on your character sheet or certain spells or abilities, they can cause you stress. Some of the monsters have abilities that can make you mark a stress, and then the GM also has the ability, if you fail a roll or have some like background story or some emotional event that would be like, oh man, this has really got under my skin and this is affecting me a lot, the DM can make you mark a stress also. If you ever let your stress get maxed out, it has a lot of really bad effects. First off, you become vulnerable and you're going to take double damage. This is pre-threshold damage, but it'll make it way easier for the monsters to get you up into that severe or double your max threshold. So that makes it really dangerous. You can't use any ability that requires you to mark a stress to do it until you clear stress. And then if something happens in game, like a monster scares you and you would have to mark a stress for that, if you don't have stress to mark, you have to mark HP instead. And so it's very dangerous to let your stress get maxed all the way out. We now have a pretty good bit of the mechanics that the game uses down. There are a few things to note. When you are going to give a roll you make, you have to decide all the add-ons that you are going to make on that roll before you do it. You cannot miss a roll by 1 and then try to add things on. The other thing of note, advantage and disadvantage in DaggerHeart work entirely different, and I like it. It's a better system, I think, because instead of rolling 2 d20s now, you get to roll a d6 and add that on if you have advantage, or you roll a d6 and just take that off. So if something comes up and it's like, oh, you've got a sneak attack on this guy, you have advantage, you still roll your duality dice, you still make that success with hope or fear or fail with hope or fear, but then you get to roll a d6 and add that on to the top of it to try to turn that into a success. And I think this is a lot more, I think it comes up better. I've always heard advantage in D&D works out to like 4.5 to 5 on a roll. And now we're rolling on 2d12s. We have a higher crit rate and all that. And I think that this kind of makes advantage feel better, as opposed to, man, I rolled a 2 and a 3. I rolled a 7 and then I get to roll my d6 and see what happens. Maybe I get there. And so that's the way the advantage and disadvantage system works. There are a few other special rolls that are going to come up that are a lot different than D&D. And let's go over a few of those. The first of which is group check rolls. One of the things about DaggerHeart is you got a big table of 6 people. You don't want 6 people making perception checks, because that's a possibility if everyone rolled with fear, of you just filling up the GM's fear box so fast. So the way group checks work, one person takes the lead, then everyone else makes a reaction roll. Note, reaction rolls do not add fear or hope. They are just straight rolls with your duality dice, so you're just looking for the number. Everyone that succeeds, they will add a +1 to the person that takes the lead on the group check. Everyone that fails will take a -1 for that group check. And if someone was to crit, that's a +2 to that check. So let's say the DC is a 15 for the group stealth check. The rogue's going to take the lead because they've got good stealth. Everyone rolls. 3 of you succeed, 2 of you fail. That's a +1 to that rogue's roll. Now that rogue will make that roll, and with them, they will roll with fear or hope. And so that's the way the group checks work. And I think this is really neat because it kind of works to where everyone who's good at stealth is helping with stealth, and the people who are bad are rolling bad because each person makes their rolls with their add-ons and their modifiers. And I think it's a really nice system for way group checks work. I've actually started implementing these in my D&D games instead of doing there's 5 of you, 3 of you pass a stealth check, 2 of you fail, blah, blah, blah. The group succeeds. I like doing this. I think it's a cool system. It integrates really easy into D&D if y'all are interested. And that's just something I've been doing because I like this DaggerHeart system, and it's a good way to get to start doing it early. The next kind of unique role that'll come up, tag team roles. You can team up with a buddy to do a combo move. And the way these work, you either both succeed or both fail with fear or hope. And so each person goes through and says what they want to do is their move. These cost 3 hope to initiate that have to be paid by one player. It's not 2 on one and 1 on the other. It's 3 from one player. Each player can initiate 1 tag team roll per session, but you can be in multiple tag teams if you aren't the one to initiate it, but you can only initiate 1. Then each person will say what they want to do. They will make their rolls, and then you get to pick. So let's say someone rolls poorly and they get like a 7 with hope. If you take that, both moves are going to fail and both players are going to get a hope. Now let's say the other person rolls really well. They get a 22 with fear. And it's like, oh man, that stinks. The GM's going to get fear, but both moves will succeed. And so you get to pick which of the 2 rolls you want, but you both get the outcome of success and the outcome of fear and hope. And I think that's a neat system because, man, it's so cool that like I'm going to pick the gnome up and I'm going to throw them and they're going to stab this guy as they fly over. And it's like you get to do like awesome team up combo moves. They do cost 3 hope, but that's, it's basically you're getting an advantage on 2 moves because either roll turns out really well. I mean, if someone crits, you both clear a strip, both get a hope, and both moves critically succeed. So it's a really neat little tag up system, and that's why you can only initiate 1 per session. The next rolls we need to go over are your actual damage rolls. And this is after, you've made your roll, hope or fear has been decided, success has been decided. Now we're going to do some damage dice. And just like D&D, the spells will tell you what damage each spell does or what damage each weapon does. The interesting thing about DaggerHeart is they've done a really good job of closing the gap between martial and spellcasters through the way their proficiency system works. There are 4 tiers of play in DaggerHeart. The first tier is only level 1. The second tier is 2 to 4. The third tier is 5 to 7. And the final tier is 8 to 10. And that's where it caps out. Your proficiency is based off of the tier you're at. So if you're tier 1, your proficiency is 1, etc. Now, when you say we take a longsword, it does a d8 in damage, but it does that based off proficiency. So if you're in tier 2 and your proficiency is 2, your longsword now does 2d8 in damage. If you were in the 4th tier, your longsword does 4d8 per attack. And this is really good because a lot of the spells scroll off proficiency also. So instead of the wizard with, world-changing abilities and the fighter still swinging a 1d8 longsword at level 20 in D&D, that's kind of gone now. Now we have this proficiency system, and so everything scales together based off of your level and what tier of play you're in. One thing of note, a lot of the spells, abilities, and weapons will have pluses based off of one of your stats. So if you're swinging a longsword and you're using your strength stat and it's a d8 plus 5, The +5 part does not go up with your proficiency bonus. Only the weapon and the spell's damage scale with proficiency, not the pluses. And another thing, since we're talking about damage right now, DaggerHeart has kind of simplified that. There is magic damage and there's physical damage. So you don't have to go through, well, this is fire, this is cold, this is ice, this was bludgeoning. It's either physical or magical. And the only other type of damage is called direct damage. Like a few certain spells and abilities will do direct damage. Those cannot have their damage reduced by using armor slots. That's basically, it means it's like bypassing your armor and doing damage directly to you. And so that's the 3 types of damage that you will also be doing when you do these attack rolls. The next of the core mechanics of DaggerHeart to go over is how our domain cards work. We get 2 of these at level 1 when we pick our class and subclass. And then each time we level up, we get another domain card to put into our loadout. And we can have up to 5 cards in our loadout at a time. And this works for all classes. It's not just casters preparing spells. This is every class is going to prepare its abilities, whether it's martial or, magical, whichever you are. And I like this because it's the same thing as the proficiency system was doing. It's kind of closing the gap between the caster classes and the martial classes, and everyone's doing very similar things, even though they have a lot of different abilities. When we prepare our domain decks, we can only have 5 in our deck at a time, and any extra cards we get will go into our vault. So, starting out, we have, at level 1, we have 2. At level 2, we have 3, and we have the option we level up to take an extra one if we want to use part of our level ups, and we'll go over that in just a second. But once we pass 5, the rest of them go into our vault. And we can switch these out anytime we do a rest. So it's basically like you're preparing for the day each time you take a rest. But let's say you forgot to put Mage Hand in your domain deck. Each card has a recall number up in the top right corner, and if you want, you can spend that much stress, mark whatever that number is on your character sheet, and you can pull that card out of your vault midday. But you have to take one of your cards and put it back in there. You don't get a 6th card for the day. You have to always be at 5 for the max. And I really like this domain card system. 1, all these cards are in the back of the book for you to print out and cut out. You can have them there at the table, so it's quick and easy. They're, physically right there in front of you in your loadout. It's simplified down to 5, so you're not really having to slow down combat digging for just the right spell of like, oh, this one does blah, 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 and that one does this, but would I rather have this resistance? It kind of streamlines combat because you have 5 things. Now, those cards may have 2 or 3 different spells on them, 2 or 3 different abilities, but you only have 5 in front of you at a time. And I think that really plays into what DaggerHeart is trying to do with combat and make it be part of the storytelling and role played out. And that's a lot easier to do if you don't have as many mechanical moving parts. And so I'm a big fan of this domain card system. I like it a lot. And speaking of like simplified and to kind of streamline stuff, let's go over the movement now because it's basically the same thing as domain cards. They've kind of tried to simplify it to where you don't have to measure as much. The range of movement is a bit different. And like I said, it's intended to be faster and more loose. You can grid it out if you were that type of table and want to play it, this is exactly 25 feet away. But there are multiple ranges here. The first is melee, and that means that you are literally adjacent to the target. There's very close, and that means you're between 5 and 10 feet away. There's close. This means you're 10 to 30 feet away. There's far range, which is 30 to 100. And then there's very far, that's 100 to 300 feet in range. Having these broad spectrum of ranges, it's not this spell has 60-foot range. That spell has 60-foot range. That's going to fall in the far range spell. Are you within 30 to 100 feet? It lets you be like really quick. The only thing you're going to have to measure is if it looks like you're going to be close. Like, oh, you're 15 feet away, not 10. You'll need to move. And so that's just a real easy way to, boom, you're within that range. You're within this range. You're within this range. instead of being like you're 45 feet away, you have 40 foot of movement. It's a little simpler now. You can still measure it out if that's how you like to play, but I like that they're trying to make it where you get to do the cool thing as opposed to being like, I want to run it. Wait, can I reach that guy? And then like it kind of really takes away from the cinematic feel of combat and the role play if you're stopping to pull out tape measures and rulers and gridding it and counting squares every time. And I just like that system. And movement in this game is that each player can move close range as part of their action. So it's basically 30 feet. Similar to D&D. Certain abilities will let you like jump from far range to close range or whatever. There's other abilities that let you be faster and more agile. And then if you want to move farther than that, you can use your action, make an agility roll. And if you pass it, it rolls just with your duality dice. So if you want to try, it's basically like a dash action if you want to try to move from far range into melee range. But you still have to roll an agility roll, and you have to do that with hope or fear. And so there's a chance that dash action costs your party the spotlight. And I like that too, because it's like, ooh, you want to get up there real quick. And it's like, it makes everything just have a little more weight. And I just think that's a really cool way to do combat. Now, the next part is going to be so different from Dungeons and Dragons. And I think it's an interesting system, and I would love to try it out and see how it affects like long dungeon crawls and stuff like that. But the rest are way different. When you take a short rest, you get to pick 2 downtime activities, and there's a list of these, but you can only do 2 of them per short rest. The first of these is you can tend your wounds, and this is basically how you heal on a short rest. You get to roll 1d4 plus your tier level and clear that many hit points. You can clear stress. It's the same thing. You roll 1d4 plus your tier level, and you clear stress. You repair your armor, and this is how you clear your armor slots. Like ours had 3 earlier, so we'd roll 1d4 plus our tier. You can also do this one to an ally's armor. So if you have a tank and you haven't taken any damage and you don't need to clear stress, you can spend one of your turns to help clear up their armor. And then the other thing you can do on a short rest is you can prepare, and this is you getting ready for the day, and you gain a hope. But if you do this one with someone else, you can each gain 2 hope. So it's good if you have 2 people to prepare. The long rest, it has the same things with an extra one, and they work better. When you get to take a long rest, tend wounds, that clears all your HP, clear stress, all your stress, repair armor, repairs all your armor. The prepare, it works the same. You can still get 1 hope for yourself if you do it, or 2 hope if you do it with a person. The extra one that you can do on a long rest is that you can work on a progress. And these will normally have like a progress counter on them. And after so many times of doing this, you'll finish the project, you'll get the item, you'll get whatever it is. And sometimes you may have to make rolls on these to see how well you're doing. And these can be like translating books, building weapons. It's something that you and the GM work out together. But downtime in this game also comes with consequences. So you won't just want to be taking a short rest after every fight, because on a short rest, the GM gains 1d fear. And on a long rest, they gain 1d4 plus 1 for each person at the table. You have 6-person table, there's a chance that DM is going to be starting with 7 to 10 fear every time you take a long rest. So it makes you kind of like extend your adventuring days, as opposed to, well, we've taken a little bit of damage, but I'd sure like to have all those spell slots in my action surge back. Let's take a short rest now. It also boosts the GM. And I think that keeps the like intensity of the game higher and makes it where there's a little more earnestness to have a long adventuring day, as opposed to every time we have a fight, we want to try to like secure the area and take a short rest or a long rest. And the next big change between D&D and DaggerHeart, it's going to be when you die. Now when you die and you mark that last HP, you don't make death saves, you get to make a death move. And you have 3 of these to pick from. The first of which is Blaze of Glory. You accept your fate, you get to go out in style, You get to tell the GM what your character's last move is, and then it's an auto crit. One thing of note, this isn't a free like nuclear bomb. You don't just get to, I died, but I kill the BBEG and take her out with me or him out with me. It has to be in the wheelhouse of like one of your character's moves, but you get to make the move and it's an auto crit, but then your character is dead. There is the avoid death option. This one, you just go unconscious. You can't be targeted by attacks and you can't do anything during this time. You come out of this stasis when someone clears 1 HP for you or if they finish a long rest. When you do this, you roll your hope die. If its value is equal to or lower than your character level, you gain a scar. When you do, you get to pick the scar, and this should be on theme for how you died, or it does come with a cost though. You have to mark out one of your hope slots permanently, but you do get +2 to your attack rolls. And then the other option is you can try to risk it. And to do this, you roll your hope die and your fear die. If your fear die is higher, you're dead. No finishing move, anything, you're gone. If your hope die is higher, you come back to life, and whatever you rolled on your hope die, you can clear that many hope or stress slots. So let's say you rolled a 7 on your hope die and a 6 on your fear die. You pop back up, you can clear 4 HP and 3 stress, or any combination of that you like. So it's really cool. If you're a gambler, you can hop right back in the fight. There's a chance you go from dead to like, oh, you shrug it off and like full health again, or no stress, or whatever you mark, depending on how high you roll with your hope die. But if that fear die is higher, your character is gone. And I think that's a really neat system. You don't have to make a death save if you don't want to die completely. You can just, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to wait till somebody can heal me up. If you want to go out in the blaze of glory, that's also your option. I think it's a really cool way for them to handle deaths and taking death saves out of the game. The last of the big core mechanics that I want to go over for all the players is leveling. DaggerHeart uses a milestone system for leveling. GM and players decide on the pace of the campaign and how fast they want the level ups to happen. They have a suggestion in the book of 3 sessions per level, but it's all up to the party members and the GM. One thing of note, DaggerHeart levels up everyone at the same time. So no more of that DM shenanigans of, oh, you missed 2 sessions, so everyone else is level 6, but you're still level 5. That doesn't happen. You're in a party together. Everyone levels up, same milestone time. I like that. Alleviates a lot of problems and kind of takes out DMs being a little sore about people not showing up and things like that. And it's just a nice, simple way to take that out of the game, remove that option. Each time you level up, you get to make some choices, and each time you move up a tier, you get a little bit of extra goodies too. So when we level up to level 2 from 1, our proficiency goes up to 2. We get 1 domain card for free, and we get to add a new experience each time we add a tier level. So from 1 to 2, we will get a new domain card, we'll get a new experience, and then we get to pick 2 of the following options, and they have limits on how many times per tier you can do each of them. So you can gain a +1 to 2 different stats. These get marked, and there's a spot on your character sheet to mark that you've increased a stat, and you can't increase that stat again until you clear that mark out, and that's something that happens when you hit a new tier. So you can't just pile on agility points every time you level up from 2 to 4. Once you put +1 to it, you can only add that one time until you clear that mark from hitting the next tier. You can get a permanent HP slot. You can do this 2 times per tier. You can get permanent stress slots. You can do these 2 times per tier. You can get a permanent +1 to 2 different experiences, and those would give out a +3 now when you use them. And you can do that just 1 time per tier. Or you can get an extra domain card that is in the same level that you are. You can't ever take a domain card that's higher in your level, and you can do that one time per tier. And you can do a permanent +1 to your evasion one time per tier. So at level 5, when we hit tier 3, it would clear out our marks. And if we wanted to increase stats again, that would happen. Also, when you get to tier 3, you get another option. You can increase your proficiency. And so this is if you're wanting to be a high DPS class, since your damage die scale with your proficiency, you now have the option when you level up at level 5 in that 3rd tier of play to start putting in extra proficiencies, which would give you an extra damage dice. And you can do that 2 times per tier. Also at level 5, when you start tier 3, you have the option of multi-classing. You can't do this, like I said, until level 5. And when you do it, it costs both of your level choices for that level. You mark the multi-class box, and then you mark the subclass card, and then you're taking both of those for that. And you get to pick a domain card with those. And then at tier 4, they are the same as tier 3. One thing of note, you can, when you level up, mark anything you want from the previous tier. So if you want to start piling on HP later and you didn't take the 2 HP bonus slots from tier 1, when you level up from 5 to 6 and you're in tier 3, you can go back and mark those. That's entirely up to you. And so these are basically the core that'll get you started in the game. The rest of the book is really great, and it's basically turns into like the equipment section and the magic item section from the player's handbook and the DMG. There is a full monster manual in there that goes through every monster you'll need for starting off on these first little sections. It does have some really cool sections for the GMs where they have like world overviews and like mechanics. If anyone listened to the Age of Umber podcast where they have the Umbral Winds, that's an actual mechanic that is in the book. If you wanted to play in that world, that you can only rest at Sacred Pyres and blah, blah, blah. And there are 5 of those in this. There's different degrees of difficulty for starting out. That's something we'll probably go over. I want to do one of these on DaggerHeart from a GM perspective, not just on like the mechanics and the player creation and what the players do. I'd like to do one probably later in a couple weeks on running this from the GM standpoint, and I'll go over the rest of the book in that, because the rest of it's kind of like the Dungeons Master Guide and the Monster Manual and stuff that the normal player won't need to have like a good handle on, but the GMs will really, I geeked out so hard to it. I think it's awesome. I've been tearing through this book and it's just great. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope you all enjoyed this breakdown of the DaggerHeart core mechanics from the player standpoint and how the general flow of the game is meant to be played. And I'll probably do a little bit more material on this in the coming future, as I'm really intrigued with this new system and really hoping to get to run some soon. If y'all could, please leave a like, a follow, a comment, wherever you get your podcast. And I'd love to hear from y'all. Until next time. May your GMs be kind. May your hope dice roll high. Bye.